Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Securosis Firestarter for, I don't know, I think it's October 6th, give or take. So I'm Rich Mogul. Welcome back. We've been a little sporadic, and I'll be completely honest with you guys. We're going to do our best to stick to, one a week, but with the travel schedules we were just going over, especially between me and Mike, it's going to be a little tough to get them all done. So bear with us through the end of the year. I don't know, maybe we'll come up with some nice end of the year, surprise. I don't know what that could possibly be.
It will involve alcohol.
Oh, yes, yes, the thing that makes everything better.
Yeah.
I learned that from television, the other thing that makes everything better. And then there's the internet, what's left of it after the bash vulnerability. But we'll get to that. So that was Mr. Mike Rothman joining us. Mike, how's it going?
It's good. It's good. I guess once a year I need to remind myself why overnight flights are a very bad idea if you have an option to not take an overnight flight. So I learned that again this week because I've been a zombie for most of the, but I'm starting to feel human, and it's like Friday. So just a bad idea for me. I need my bed, I need my comfy pillows, and basically I'm a prima donna, and I understand that. Even a first class seat is just not sufficient for what a man like me needs.
How do you follow that? I mean, how do you follow that? Hello from the land of $1,000,000 weather. It's October in Phoenix, and things are starting to really get nice here, which obviously means that every one of our relatives are going to come and visit now. So it's that holiday season. And yeah, my parents are coming to visit my home for the first time ever, like in 15 years. So I get finished with work, and then it's like clean this, fix this, paint this, Yeah, so it's been a nonstop work followed by work kind of month. So
Well, if your house starts looking too nice, we'll send Ryan up there to, help. Yeah,
that'd be good.
Hulk smash.
Yeah.
Hulk smash. Yeah, it couldn't be any worse than the Rottweilers. So
And
yeah,
maybe
you can play with
less
Rottweilers.
drool. Right? We have slightly less drool.
Well, I don't know, Adrian. The dogs are house trained, so and Ryan is not. So there you go. He's not even paper trained.
Actually, I would pay to see somebody try to put a diaper on Adrian's Rottweiler Ella. That would be awesome.
All right. With that, maybe we should actually go ahead and talk about something security related. So, all right. So look. Apparently, there's a vulnerability in like a thing that's on every Unix system on the face of the planet. Everybody's heard about Bash, and I have a suspicion we're still figuring out the implications. So, Mike, you just had to patch our OpenVPN server. We've been kind of thinking about this. It doesn't look like kind of like Harper there's massive instant exploitation, but I have a suspicion this is one that's going to be with us for a while. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is just the breadth of the infrastructure, right? Even if everybody gets religion and says, I'm going to, update and I'm going to patch and I'm going to, fix what I can fix now. And again, I don't think that we really understand all the ripple effects of what this vulnerability means on a lot of these interconnected systems nowadays. But you still have so many of these devices out there. It's going to take a while to get through everything, and through the wonders of automated vuln testing and scanning and all that. I mean, you're going to be able to isolate the ones that aren't patched pretty quickly, and that just makes it open season on a lot of these servers for the attackers and adversaries, and kind of making these ones, especially the ones that live up in the cloud, into kind of high volume bots, and which is always awesome when you take over cloud servers and bot them and have them start blasting on things.
Yeah, I mean, the part that I find is interesting is Bash is used in so many different ways as part of so many different apps, even when it shouldn't be. And everyone's like, oh, you should never make a system call. I'm like, I'm a security guy. I know that. I have plenty of scripts I've written that make those system calls. They're not externally accessible things or, big app platforms or anything else. It's just a very common way to kind of get things done, especially when you're writing, small bits of code for your own systems. And clearly those things have also, kind of extended out into, kind of other areas. So, I suspect that one of the reasons I think this is going to be with us for a while is two things. One is we don't have a patch, and I think we need that actually patches everything. I think that's something we need to get to. This disclosure is probably one of the most effed up disclosures I have ever seen. I mean, this makes Dan Kaminsky's DNS thing look, like not a problem at all compared to how badly the disclosure on this one appears to have been messed up. But so many different kinds of apps and so many different parts of the system hook in so many different ways. So for listeners, one example was the DHCP on Unix, the client on Unix systems. So if we're running an Ubuntu laptop and you connect it to a hostile DHCP server just to get your IP address, you're done. And of course, I'm like, well, OS 10 is vulnerable. Is that going to be a problem on Macs? Because that would have been huge. And I actually did some testing at home and then reached out to Apple to confirm that my results were okay. And it wasn't vulnerable to that because they had actually removed that. So
Bash, right?
Yeah. Well, they still had it. Bash obviously was still vulnerable,
Right.
but DHCP didn't. They had actually cleaned up that code, which brings very interesting discussion on open source versus closed source. And
Yeah. You know what it kind of reminds me of, which is interesting when you kind of mention the whole different number of places that Bash is that you wouldn't even expect, is SQL Slammer. Right, you remember old school SQL Slammer, which was again it was well, it's a problem with the Jet database. Well, okay, great. Where is that? Everywhere. Yeah, so again, it's one of these things where it just keeps magnifying. The ripple effect is pretty significant, just because it is one of those fundamental pieces that you don't even know is in there half the time. And oh, by the way, this is the precursor of things to come. Right, because as all these stacks start to happen, and as you start building out, kind of a lot of these, whether it's open source or not open source, you've got a bunch of components that end up being packaged together. You have a hole or a problem in one of the ones down at the bottom of the stack. You don't even know what that is. Right, and now you're in a situation where you're going to start to find out pretty quickly that it's not just the attack surface of the things that you think you're deploying. Right, it's the attack surface of the whole stack underneath it that I think is underappreciated for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that was interesting. So a few weeks ago, Adrian and I were talking with one of the vendors who is going to license one of our papers, and they were like, "Can you please talk about X, Y, Z, third-party or component analysis for code scanning stuff underneath?" And I almost we were kind of pushing back a little bit because we're always very wary. So, okay, they've got a feature. They want to, we're doing the research. It's got to be independent, but they want us to talk about that. Are we doing that independently? I said, well, yeah, scanning for some of the basic stuff. And I think I was almost downplaying it too much because of my instinctive kind of, I can't let anything guide the research, even when it turns out in the end it was actually valuable. Because that's the kind of thing that comes up in situations like this, just knowing kind of what hooks, what pieces, what things are you connecting with inside of your apps. And it's one thing with your own apps, but I mean, now that we're finding out that this was embedded also in so many different kind of infrastructure pieces, and in some cases it was like we have open VPN servers that we use for some of our different kinds of VPN things. I was kind of, when this came out, I go, I highly suspect that is going to be vulnerable. Like, I've never looked at the code, I've never gone in deep on it. I just deploy it. I'm our ops guy. But something like tickled my spidey sense. I'm like, I can't imagine that is not hooking in the system somehow, and not in a way that's going to hit Bash. And sure enough, it was vulnerable. And so we've had to go through and do patching on that, and it's just a mess. And I like to contrast it. Adrian, do you have anything else before I switch our gears a little bit into the?
No, I'll get some stuff I want to add later, but keep going.
So, I'd like to contrast this because that same week we had a massive Zen vulnerability. And for Zen as the hypervisor, it's what Rackspace uses. It's the basis of the hypervisor that Amazon uses. They've customized it. IBM's got it in their cloud. And the Zen vulnerability was we kind of narrowed in on this because I got email like a lot of other cloud admins saying, from Amazon, we're going to reboot your server during this maintenance window. You don't have a choice. We're shutting it down. We're starting it back up. That's it. And that's happened once before, and we knew it was tied to a vulnerability. And so I did a Twitter and I did a blog post on that. And then it became out fairly quickly afterwards. And then Amazon came out. They'd actually reached out to make sure we knew they had made a public statement on it that, yes, there's a security vulnerability in Zen. And what Zen did is it wasn't in Citrix, I guess. I can't remember if Citrix still controls the open source version of it or not. They said there's a patch going to be released on October 1st. We're not telling anyone what it is. all the major providers and platforms have been contacted on the back end ahead of time so that they have time to get their infrastructure dealt with. And that's probably been the work for many months, would be my guess. Very coordinated, and then by the time it was released, at least all the major platforms were locked down at that point, and then everybody else who wasn't, kind of one of those early ones was able to patch. And then the patch fixed the problem. We have Bash. I don't know why this was rushed, but it looks like it was 2 weeks or less from when the researcher discovered this, and maybe it was one of those, I'm going to open disclose this in 2 weeks, F you all.
Right.
You got to fix because I've decided it's important to release it. And then, the first news comes out of Red Hat, and they release their patch, and then it turns out their patch doesn't work, and then everybody else is trying to get their patches done, and everyone's trying to figure out who's vulnerable and kind of what, and the patches are broken, and that's coming out like the day after, and broken in a way that makes them very exploitable. So almost, it looks like no coordination, just a mess, and I think that's problematic. That's not the kind of mistakes that we can afford to make. Bash was only somewhat exploitable, but imagine if something was massively exploitable. I don't know what you guys think.
Certain types of utilities like that are just going to weave their way through everything because they're useful. And a lot of the Unix tools and Unix system stuff, it's woven right down to the core. I mean, like ping, for example, is woven right into the guts of the kernel. So if you've got legacy code like this that has a vulnerability in it, getting that patched is going to be a nightmare because of not just because of the complexity of fixing something like that and not having horrific side effects, but also the number of systems that are in play that have got to be patched. So this is going to be an ugly one. It's going to be an ugly one for a long time. At least we have the ability to discover vulnerable systems, but it's going to take a while.
So do the adversaries.
Yeah, well, that's time to fix. It's a problem. So I don't know. That's not one of the most interesting.
All right. So, but hold on a second. So if you're just to get back on this whole patching thing, right? So if you have systems that are vulnerable to this, where do you start, right? What do you do first? Do you sit there and say, all right, anything that's internet accessible right now, I've got to fix right now, pronto, because this thing is, scannable and you can identify it through pretty straightforward, vulnerability things, and then I start worrying about stuff in my data center. Do I think about, what do you help folks prioritize a little bit in terms of, what their efforts need to be, because they can't do everything at one time, that's for sure.
Yeah, it comes down to two things, because just being internet accessible isn't enough of an indicator of whether or not that system is going to be a problem, and we can't rely on the vulnerability scans because there's a layer of depth here. So my recommendation is two things. Anything internet facing, focus there first, clearly. I think you do still need to worry about the internal systems because there's so many different, we all know that there's no effective perimeter anymore. So somebody gets in and they can take advantage of this. And I don't want people to think that, I just patched the internet systems and I've got a year to get all the internal stuff done. If you have a server with SSH with guests on it, for example, somebody can slice right through that. DHCP, might be an issue. Usually you don't have that for fixed servers. But I prioritize the more public-facing, then the more VPN, remote access-oriented systems, and then start mapping out the rest of the infrastructure. This is an example of why we're becoming such big fans of things like Chef and Puppet and Ansible, where you can actually much more quickly roll out wide-scale updates into your environment. And in my book, I would actually use this as an excuse to bring in one of those tools at this point. You need to be able to do coordinated rolling patches throughout a large infrastructure. You can't do that with kind of the manual techniques we've got. So you might as well start implementing that if you have not already in your environment. And picking between those, kind of varies. So Chef and Puppet, you install an agent on the server, so you do have to go into all of them. If you have all of your SSH keys kind of in one place, then Ansible might make more sense because it actually does a push where it makes an SSH connection to the servers and then handles its management that way remotely versus the agent doing the work on the inside. But something along those lines, now's a good time to do it. Prioritize on the edge first. Things connected more closely to remote access, and then internal would be my next guess. In terms of Macs, just do roll out that bash update on the Macs if you have those in your environment, or encourage your users to do that. Most default Macs really aren't vulnerable to this. You actually, because Apple did turn it off in any of the default places, it looks like it's not using bash. But if somebody sets it up as a web server and we don't know what apps will hook in. Anything in the app store is safe because that's not allowed to make those connections. But what other random apps are out there? I know I probably have plenty installed on my system. And but it looks like we're going to have, if you're not hugely worried, it looks like there's going to be a major OS 10 update here very quickly, within a month. And so you might, except for anything critical, might hold off for that.
Or you can do what we did and turn off certain services that we were worried about. You can get away with that.
Yeah, for example, one of our OpenVPN servers, we IP locked it. There's only like 3 of us that use it, for some of our infrastructure. So I mean, and here's the nice thing about cloud. That one was in cloud. I was able to lock it down. I mean, it took me 8 seconds, and most of that was just logging in to the Amazon's web interface because I didn't have that one set up for command line. I logged in, changed the security group, completely locked it down. Now I'm just getting IP addresses and opening those up, and that's not something you could do nearly as easily in a traditional kind of environment. You can change your firewall rules, but it's much easier for me to pop around security groups than log into a firewall and change the rule set.
Good, Adrian. You were about to say something before I totally interrupted you.
No, I had a number of different things that I thought were really interesting about this, and one was the debate that was started by Robert Graham about how obsolete this code is and what to do about it. It was built in a time where security concerns were not in a coder's mind, and it's just simply,
like today.
Well, it's at least some awareness for development teams and security. Okay. But yeah, your point's well taken. Well, no, this was actually one of the keynote at Black Hat. They were talking about code basically having a useful lifespan, maybe even time bombing code that at a certain point it's outlived its useful lifespan, and they're just going to shut it down or remove it. Kind of the Blade Runner rule of software development, that after a certain point in time, we just no longer trust this particular piece of code to be secure or reliable. And that's a part of this entire discussion about what's going on with legacy apps and legacy code.
Yeah, I think Dan Gear did that one, and that's not happening. I mean, we know that's not happening.
Not happening.
No, but it'll be interesting. I mean, there's some other developments, and we're running a little long, so I'll do this quickly. But again, not to harp on like cloud and DevOps things, but like the next version of Windows, they're looking at doing like monthly updates. I like monthly actual changes to the OS, not just security patches. And it looks like they're going to be doing very fast feedback cycles and following DevOps-like techniques, which is fascinating because we're not used to seeing that for commercial off-the-shelf software. It's usually the kind of thing you see in cloud services.
Yeah, that looks great on a flow chart. We'll see how well that works when you have 100 million devices out there that are in some certain state of upgrade.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying that it's going to be all perfect, but it's clear we see trends moving, in that direction. It certainly is for any of the web services pieces. I mean, that's how those companies are maintaining competitiveness. Maybe we'll get more, but even if we get that on something like Microsoft, it's not going to happen for like embedded controllers and light bulbs and all of those things, which are not my huge concern with Bash now, but down the road.
DevOps my fridge.
Yeah. But anyway, I don't know. I think it was a fascinating kind of confluence of events that occurred here.
It continues to highlight the brittle nature of what we have built modern society on, right? And that 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 fairly major infrastructure class issues, we're still no better at handling them. Which, again, if you're a guy that's going to get worried and put on your tinfoil hat, you're like, start stocking up on the pork and beans, guys. I choose not to do that, but again, I mean, I think this is pretty instructive of the fact that as much progress as we've made, we haven't made a lot of progress.
Yeah, I would completely agree, and it'll be interesting to see what the consequences of this end up being in the long term. All right, we've gone super long. We thank everybody for hanging out with us. You can tell we're all a little frazzled from our travel and stuff since it took us about 20 minutes just to get to the meat of this thing. You heard us whine about travel and unexpected relatives. And dude, you don't have to fix your house. It's just your house. Let them just stick him in a bedroom. They'll be fine.
Adrian's house is great.
But it is. That's why I'm like, how?
I'm not sure Adrian is driving this, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. They call that a honey-do list, I think. That's what the official term is. It's
Yeah.
long.
All right. This has gone long too. So have a great weekend, guys.
Bet
Weekend
everybody.
for us. This will be posting up on Monday, and we'll hope everybody has a great week and Hulk Bash.
Hulk bash.
Hulk Bash.